LEE is an airbender, and I can prove it. Now, I know some of you may think this is crazy, and others are itching to hear the evidence since this is one of the oldest theories in the Avatar fandom. But now I have some brand new evidence which just solidifies that LEE really is an airbender. So stay till the end of the video and I'm going to tell you the brand new canon evidence to support this theory, and subscribe and let's get into it. So we all know LEE as one of the best friends of Azula. She's a Fire Nation noble and she lived in the capital with Azula. She was elite of the elite. So you're probably thinking, well, she's a Fire Nation elite, so obviously her parents are firebenders, and therefore if she was a bender, she'd just be a firebender. But unfortunately, she was unlucky enough to be born a non-bender. But actually, I've got 7 pieces of evidence, but all point to her being an airbender. So many of these have been staring us in the face for years, and nobody in the fandom realized them until now. And one of them has just been revealed very recently, and it pretty much solidifies that this is the direction that the creators are taking LEE. So that leads us into evidence number 1. Her eyes. One of the quietest pieces of world building in Avatar is how consistent the show is about eye color, because every nation has its own. The Fire Nation characters have gold or amber eyes. You can see this in all of the named cast members: Zuko, Azula, Mai, Ozai, Iroh, Zhao, everyone. The Water Tribe obviously gets blue, the Earth Kingdom gets green eyes, and the Air Nomads had grey eyes. That's why Aang has them, that's why Monkey Arto has them, and that's why every Air Nomad child that we see in the flashbacks also have grey eyes. So now let's look at LEE. Her eyes are grey. Now this is already very unusual for someone living in the Fire Nation, and it shows that she probably has different genetics to most of the Fire Nation. In the Avatar universe, genetics do matter. There's no getting around this. Genetics matter for bending. If you have one parent from the Air Nomads and one parent from the Water Tribe, obviously you could become either, like we saw with Aang's kids. And the same goes for eye color. We've pretty much never seen somebody from a tribe that doesn't match the eye color. For example, we've pretty much never seen a Water Tribe member with green eyes. It's possible that some background character has had this, but none of the main cast characters have ever had a mismatch between the eye color and their nation. And that tells us very strongly that LEE probably comes from the Air Nomads. And I'm going to explain how that could even be possible later down in the evidence. And that leads us into evidence number 2. She looks like Aang. Now, this one's been going around the fandom for years, and this is actually the one that really sparked the LEE being an airbender theory in the first place. Now, let's zoom out from the eyes, and let's look at the whole face. Character design in Avatar, as I mentioned earlier, is very closely tied to national identity. Each nation has its own visual palette. Fire Nation characters usually have sharp features, jet black hair, and angular jawlines. Water Tribe characters trend towards darker skin and rounder faces. Earth Kingdom characters are typically heavier, set, and broader, and Air Nomads, from the little that we see of them in the original series, have soft, rounded features. Light brown hair when they have hair at all, and of course being usually smaller and lighter to be able to be more nimble when they airbend. LEE doesn't seem to fit the Fire Nation profile of any of those markers. Her hair is brown rather than black, closer to the Air Nomads. If we compare the hex colors of her hair to Aang's hair in Book 3, the shades in the codes are remarkably similar, and her face is round and soft, whereas Azula and Mai are sharp, cheekboned, and narrow. Her frame is small, light, and built for aerial work in a way that reads as Air Nomad physiology when you put it next to Aang's. The clearest comparison point is actually Jinora though, Aang's granddaughter in The Legend of Korra. Many people have noted that Jinora could actually pass as LEE's sister in a side-by-side comparison. So with the eyes and with the face and with the body features, I think this is getting pretty conclusive already, but of course there is more. And this next piece of evidence is the one that pretty much seals the deal for me. And that leads us to evidence number 3. The Air Nomads lived in the Fire Nation capital during the Roku era. The biggest hole in any LEE airbender theory used to be the obvious one. How does an Air Nomad descendant end up in the Fire Nation of all places, when the Fire Nation is the nation that carried out the attack on the Air Nomads? They wiped them out. Well, the Avatar Legends role-playing sourcebook, developed with direct input from Brian Konietzko and Michael Dante DiMartino, the original creators, actually tells us that the Fire Nation royal family were absolutely obsessed with Air Nomads and their culture. During Avatar Roku's lifetime, the Fire Nation nobility actively embraced Air Nomad philosophy in their governing style. Decades before the war, the nobility funded the construction of the Fire and Air Center of Learning at the Fire Nation capital. This was a joint institution designed to spread Air Nomad teachings across Fire Nation society, and this was created because the Fire Nation elites loved the Air Nomad culture so much. The center functioned as a small air temple in its own right, and it hosted a group of Air Nomads as permanent residents in the Fire Nation. The lore even names an Air Nomad nun named Anada, who was a woman born in the Fire Nation and adopted into the Air Nomad order. This means that Fire Nation children in that era could be raised as airbenders without ever leaving their home islands. On top of that, one of Sozin's sisters even loved Air air nomad culture so much that she married an air nomad. If they had a kid, one of them very well could have been an airbender. And certainly, since this love of air nomad culture ran so deeply through the Fire Nation nobility, Ty Lee's parents could have been the same. We know that she's an elite since she went to the same school as Azula, so what if one of her parents was a descendant from an air nomad who lived among the Fire Nation nobility at that time? This is how the events would pretty much play out. An air nomad in residence at the capital has children with the Fire Nation partner, the family buries the bloodline once Sozin turns on the temples and begins hunting survivors, and then about 4 generations later, a girl with grey eyes and a gift for chi blocking ends up at the Royal Academy with Azula, not knowing what her heritage and what her bloodline actually is. And since this source book just came out literally just a couple of years ago, I'm pretty sure the creators have put this lore in there to make it plausible that Ty Lee had airbender heritage. And that leads us to evidence number 4. The way she moves. Just watch Ty Lee in any fight scene and notice what she never really does, and that is get hit. Her entire combat style is built on evasion, redirection, and finishing the engagement before her opponent can land a blow. In the drill episode, she scales the side of a moving war machine with no visible effort. During the chase through the Earth Kingdom, she leaps distances that would require either a boost from the wind or Olympic level springs under her feet. If anything, I think this could be her airbending without actually knowing it. It could be trace levels of latent airbending in her bloodline that is actually being activated during these jumps. Compare her with Aang. Her philosophy in fighting is exactly the same as Aang. Now, obviously she wouldn't have been able to be taught this by her parents because her parents were probably many generations down from the airbender in her family, but maybe it was some type of cultural memory or blood memory that was within her that told her to fight like an airbender. And then we have evidence number 5. Her chi blocking. Chi blocking as a technique in the series only appears done by Ty Lee, and the show pretty much plays it off as a trick that she learnt at the circus. The problem with that, however, is that chi blocking requires a practitioner to know with pinpoint accuracy where the energy pathways of a human body run and how to interrupt them. In the universe of Avatar, that kind of knowledge is associated with spiritual knowledge, and that type of knowledge is only associated with the people of the air nomads, and that's exactly why spiritual projection is one of the subbending techniques of airbending and not the other nations. Guru Patik is a good example of this. Obviously he's not an airbender himself, but he lives at the Eastern Air Temple, and he probably learnt his techniques of chakras and how to unblock them from the people of the air nomads, and that's why he was at the air temples. And of course there's also the theory of him being Tigwai the Immortal, which means he's actually lived for like 1,000 years or more, but I'm not going to get into that in this video, and that is for the next video, so subscribe if you want to see that. And that leads us into evidence number 6. Her aura reading. In the Appa's Lost Days episodes, Ty Lee casually mentions that she's been able to see people's auras since she was a little kid. That tells me that that's a genetic ability, not something she learnt. Now, in the Avatar canon, aura perception is a spiritual skill tied to deep meditative training, not something that a kid in the Fire Nation could ever develop on her own. And obviously, as I just mentioned earlier, spiritual abilities are usually subbending techniques of airbending, not of the other nations. You could probably think of this as a very, very rare subbending technique of airbending, similar to flying, which is what Zahir and Guru Lahima achieved, and also spiritual projection by Jinora. Airbending is no stranger to very, very, very rare subbending techniques that only 1 or 2 people in history are ever able to do, and maybe aura reading is one of these for airbending. So Ty Lee having this ability would be very thematically fitting. I mean, she would just be yet another airbender we see on screen with a very rare and unique subbending ability of air, and it doesn't fit with any of the other bendings. And that leads us to the final point, which is her philosophy. Ty Lee's consistent choices throughout the series closely mirror the pacifist, freedom-loving culture of the Airbenders. By running away to join the circus and refusing to use lethal force, she actively rejects the rigid hierarchy and cruelty of the Fire Nation. Her dedication to these non-aggressive principles culminates when she sacrifices everything to protect May from Azula at the Boiling Rock. And then following the war, she chooses to join the Kyoshi Warriors, not stay in the Fire Nation. The Kyoshi Warriors are a disciplined communal group that shares many spiritual and social traits with Air Nomad society, despite being started in the name of Avatar Kyoshi, an Earth avatar. Ultimately, Ty Lee's character arc, values, and final life choices perfectly embody the philosophy of a disciplined air nomad. And for all of those reasons, this is why Ty Lee is an airbender. Thanks again for watching, subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.